Hi, everybody. Good day, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to Renaissance Podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Martin Burns. Thank you for joining us. This is episode 3. Joining us today, one of my good friends in Mexico City, incredible human being in general. I'll let him tell you more about himself in a minute. But importantly, the primary topic of discussion is going to be around him being the founder of Elevar Salud, an incredible data slash health tech company, digital health company in Mexico. That I've had the pleasure of working with him a little bit on in the last few months. Let's get straight to it. Vidit, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Chris, thank you for having me on your podcast, and good to see you in video after a long time.
Likewise, man. Likewise. I hope you had a good weekend and a good start to the week. As I say, Vidit's down in Mexico City, where he's been building his startup. But before we get to that, why don't we go back to the beginning, and you can tell us a little bit about your life story, kind of before you got to this point. Maybe start with childhood, maybe some inspirations from there. What did you want to become? Is this anything like that? And yeah, tell us a little bit about your background in general.
Awesome. Well, look, I was born in India to a family of entrepreneurs, and we moved around quite a bit. I grew up between India, a little bit in South Africa, and then moved to the U.S. At the age of 17. And I've always been interested in strategy. And growing up, strategy dictated two or three career options for me in my mind. One was to become an entrepreneur, follow my family's path. Second, I've always also been interested in war, so maybe figure out a way to get into any sort of military organization. Uh, and in the end, I realized that I like my life too much, and I decided to go get my bachelor's in finance and then my MBA, and then worked in finance for about 10 years. And then moved to Mexico a couple of years ago and decided to flex my entrepreneurial muscle. That's a little bit on that, and it's been an amazing journey so
Yeah,
far in Mexico.
yeah, yeah. Amazing place and amazing what you're doing there for sure. Let me ask you one question. Like, I know you used to work your background is in banking, private equity. Uh,
Mhm.
have you have you ever? I mean, some would consider this a little bit of a leap from that. To be honest, I see it as more of a reasonable transition because you kind of know how to operate companies from the other side.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, was this like your first passion project in terms of a startup? Like, was this the first startup that you ever kind of felt compelled to start and invest yourself into as a founder? Or did you ever look at anything or consider anything before this?
That's a great question. Look, I think I've had a few ideas before that I have thought about executing on, mostly in real estate and hospitality. But for whatever reason, when I really thought about them, I did not resonate. I do have a very extensive background in working with other operators and guiding them and investing in them. So that gave me sort of like I would say maybe a secondhand knowledge on seeing what works, what does not work. But I think, with Elevar Salud, the company that I'm building right now, that one became a more that came from a more of a personal experience side, which is always the passion becomes more intense when you have experienced something personally. Um, so yeah,
What was
Elevar,
that experience?
yeah, the experience was, without going too deep into that, look, we moved, my wife and I recently married in 2020. In the middle of the pandemic, we moved out to Mexico just as everybody's working from home. And a couple of things happened on a personal side. Few family members and friends came to visit, and as luck would have it, they needed some medical attention. And at that point, we were unable to figure out how to get that medical care. That ranged from finding the right doctors, figuring out the right steps to go on from there, how to access the right healthcare system. And we were unable to do that. It was very, very difficult. Long story short, we tried to consult with 6 to 7 doctors in a short span of time, and majority of them did not take place. The ones that did take place were very low quality consultations with the doctors, where we did not figure out what's actually going on. And that led me to think, wow, how does that happen in a country like Mexico? When you, from the outside surface, Latin America and Mexico in general has done so well in digitally transforming their entire economy from different verticals, whether that be banking and with fintech, to logistics, to things like grocery deliveries. You can buy a car online. Everybody's dating online. Everything is happening online. And healthcare was just one thing that was still very, very old school. And that personal experience kind of made me realize that there's so many gaps that need to be filled. I have some experience working with investing in healthcare companies as an angel investor professionally as well. So for me, the path became very, very clear. Okay, somebody needs to come do it. Why don't we give it a shot? I have some experience doing that. I can pull together, let me give it a shot. If I can pull together a great team and start executing. So that's sort of what we saw, and that's what we're doing now.
Amazing. Is there is there an apathetic attitude
Mhm.
towards health in general in Mexico amongst the people? Like, is it a lower priority for people, or has the lack of digitalization in the space until now um, been just kind of a culmination of events? Like, is it a cultural thing that people prefer to have a personal connection with a doctor, which then makes it
Mhm.
more difficult for outsiders to get healthcare? Or is it more just a case of like nobody's actually bothered to try and take it on and do it?
It's a great question. I think it's a combination of everything. There have been, obviously that personal touch with the doctor is necessary as it used to be in even in the US or Western Europe. And it's still very, very important. And on the other hand, I think, what we have seen at least is that some people have tried to do it, but it has never been done from a customer perspective. It has been done, let's build a company where we put a doctor behind the camera. And, people obviously need to take care of their health. That is very, very obvious. So hopefully you build and they will come. And that mentality, normally in a very customer centered business, just does not translate into a good business. So we saw a bunch of companies coming in, especially during the pandemic, trying to do that and miserably failing. And so it's a definitely a combination of both. The way we think that this has to be solved is you have to create that personal touch that patients have with the doctors, and also doctors have with the patient, right? If it's only patients looking for that connection and doctors are unable to provide, and they think of patients as just a number who comes in and pays them and they prescribe that medication, then the game is over. It has to be a two-way street, something that is already happening in Mexico. The way the system is, that is how it operates. Just because the demand is too much, the supply is inefficient. And in the end, the quality really suffers, the personal touch really, really suffers.
Yeah, yeah, understood. So you started Elevar with a pretty. I mean, was your initial objective? Was it like, right, we're going to do this? We're going to do this across the whole country. We're going to build a whole platform, and we're going to completely encompass everything. And in say 5 years' time, everyone's going to be using this, and that's how they're going to access healthcare across the country. Or was it more of a regional thing to start with?
Yeah. Look at the vision. The long term vision is to become the healthcare name that everybody thinks about when they need to take care of their health. But we all know, you cannot cast a wide net and catch everything. That's a terrible way to do business, and something I've seen for the 10 years of my background in finance. What we decided to do was, okay, let's really figure out what are the actual pain points in Mexico for doctors and for patients. What are the gaps that the patients are looking to fill in that the medical system is unable to provide, and what are the sufferings of doctors that the current ecosystem infrastructure is unable to provide? And the way we thought about that is, look, we can sit down here and fundamentally talk about the problems in Mexico in healthcare. They're just too vast. Look, we're not here to change the whole system. It's impossible.
Yeah,
The companies that are doing healthcare in Mexico for a while. But we have to figure out data wise, let's start collecting data on the actual needs. So what we had some assumptions that everybody, a lot of people in Mexico have diabetes. So maybe there's an angle over there. Maybe we can fix that problem. Women's health is a complicated issue. No matter if you're in Mexico or in the US, the health is more complex. Taking care of that health is even more complex. And women are just in general a lot more intelligent about their health than Chris, you and I guess we are. We can get hit by a car and still come back home and not take care of it. We're like, well, give it a month, I'll be fine. Women, on the other hand, are a lot different. So these were some of the assumptions, and we started to act on those assumptions. What we realized is that actually diabetes, for example, is something that people are very easy understand how to take care of, that not angle that we want to pursue. Women's health is very interesting because it has so many different angles, from gynecological health to mental health to even pediatric health, which is indirectly related to them, pre and postnatal care. So that became very interesting. Then there were other sectors like mental health in general, sexual health, that is very, very interesting, dermatology. So certain specializations that became very, very interesting. The way we went about collecting that data was, we had a little puzzle to solve. How do we have very low barriers to entry and get people to try out the service, uh, give us the information that we need to figure out how we can provide them the better care? So we had a very simple idea. Let's build a platform which is based on WhatsApp, which almost more than 75% of Mexicans use almost daily to communicate, and where people can come in and connect with a doctor on demand and ask about anything. This could be, hey, I have some stomach ache, or I have food poisoning. Did this blood test? I do not understand these results. To a doctor, I went to a doctor. They diagnosed with me with XYZ kind of disease. I want a second or third opinion. So let's do that. And that way we will very organically, hopefully, if we are somewhat right, we will very organically start figuring out what is it that people want. And that's what we did. And for us, that has been a gold mine. We did better than what we expected. And from there on, we compartmentalized these other things that people really need. And these are the things where we can actually provide good service and, make money, because that's very essential for any business. Uh, that's how we figured out the patient side. On the doctor side, let me know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but
no, no, carry on, carry on. This is all good.
awesome. On the doctor side, what we realize is the problems that doctors face are very fundamental. Uh, Doctors, A, do not make enough money unless they work at the large private institutions, which only 5% of doctors in Mexico get to go work at. It's a very privileged job to have. The remaining doctors have very few options. Work in public healthcare system where they get paid very, very little money, almost the same, a little over the money an Uber driver makes, working the same amount of hours than what somebody would make. So that to me was mind blowing. Coming from America, where doctors are some of the highest paid professionals, even in the Western world, even in India, where doctors do not make money as American doctors do, but make significant amount of money. This was unpleasant information, let's just say that, for me to understand. So that's one option. So the third option is to go try to build up their private practices, which is impractical, very difficult, very expensive to build. very capital intensive. And even if you are somehow able to build it, then how do you get patients coming in? You have to build a brand and all of that. So that makes it very difficult. So we're like, okay, so if we can
How,
figure out a way.
how does the healthcare system work in general in Mexico? Is public healthcare provided free of charge, or is it supplemented by the government, or is it always a cost that the patient has to incur? How does it work?
Yeah. So public healthcare, just like public healthcare anywhere in the world, is a total mess in Mexico. So the government does provide public healthcare. About 55% of the population is like covered by some sort of public healthcare scheme. The biggest one is called IMSS. And the reality is that you want to go see a doctor. People want to go see a doctor when they need to go see a doctor, right? When they actually have an emergency or need, and that part is not solved by public healthcare because there are significant waiting times. The quality of to give you an idea, if you want to see a physician in certain areas, just a GP, that it can take anywhere from 6 hours to a week to see that doctor.
Yeah,
And if you
even
want to see a
even in Mexico City, you see queues round the block of
lines
people
around the
going
block.
to see doctors every day.
Yeah, you actually saw that because you were living in the part of Mexico City that you were living in. There used to be a IMSS clinic right there. Yeah,
Yeah,
and they are, yeah, exactly. So it's very difficult. And on specialist side, that could take from weeks to months to get an appointment with a doctor. And even if you're lucky enough to get one, then the quality of service is just really bad because the system is just so overwhelmed with the amount of demand that people have that they cannot pay individualized personalized attention to everybody. So what happens is majority of the people actually spill over to the two things happen. They either don't seek the care that they need, any kind of medical care, or they go into private sector. And private sector is also like very expensive, the top tier one, completely inaccessible cost wise and also geographically by majority of these people. Or you have to go to this very, very low tier system, which has very low entry fee, could range anywhere from $5 to $10 max. And you go there for your very simple symptoms like food poisoning, I have a fever, I have a headache, and you go there. And these doctors act as a gatekeeper to having you prescription drugs. So those are the two systems. So if you have something in between that, you basically have nothing to do. Like you cannot afford the good private one. The lower private one does not solve that issue. So at that point, you just are kind of like at the mercy of Christ. Let's just say that, and from the Mexican context, and that's exactly the area that we are catering to. It's the middle 60 to 70% of Mexican population, the middle class, that has disposable income, that has healthcare needs that are becoming more and more complex as the health levels around the globe are going down. And they have disposable income, desire to take care of their health, just having nothing, nowhere to meet that need. And that's where Elevar Salud comes in and provides them in a decentralized way, and maintaining a good quality. And at the same time, making sure that the patient always knows, follow a journey, a path to having better care, and doctors know where the patient is at every step of the way.
yeah, very good. So, how have you found the experience of trying to do this in Mexico? Of first of all, starting a company in Mexico, structuring it properly, putting the team together. Like how was all of that initially, and
Yeah,
what are the pain
it's
points that you've experienced?
yeah, it's complex, man. Look, it's Mexico is not as advanced as some other emerging markets are when it comes to supporting a startup. The startup ecosystem is still in very nascent stages, although it's growing very rapidly, but it's leaps and bounds behind apple to apple comparison of Brazil or India, or Chile, where there's adequate government support, private sector support, and all of that. So, and us also, it's very clear I'm not from here. So we had an additional layer of complexity to figure out. We had to first figure out the right team, and it took us a few months to 6 to 7 months to really start pulling together the right team, the right team that actually believes in the vision, that actually sees the problem and sees the solution. And what we also saw is that if we were looking for, when we were building our team, when we started talking to the obvious people, right, the obvious candidates, people in within the healthcare system of Mexico, and what we realize is that they are very limited in how they think a problem could be solved because they have just been boxed into that same problem for so long that it was just very, very difficult for them to think outside of the box. So at that point, like, okay, we need a subject matter expert who knows the healthcare system as a practitioner, and maybe also as somebody who's been a practitioner but also has done things outside of practice, maybe social care or something like that, consulting, management consulting, and stuff like
Yeah.
that. That's the first step that we did. We brought on one of my co-founders who was a medically trained doctor's practice, and then became a management consultant in the healthcare sector in Latam. So putting a team together was difficult, and then similar things happened when we were trying to put together the tech team. It was very difficult to find the right talent, so we had to outsource our team outside of Mexico and all of that. As far as other things are concerned, we those were the more Mexico related complexities that we faced, and I think the rest are any entrepreneur, their entrepreneurial journey of starting something or building something that they have a vision for. So there was nothing different for us from that regard.
Yeah. And I know you've put a lot into this personally, both in terms of your time and expertise and blood, sweat, and tears, but you also bootstrapped and bankrolled this yourself,
Hmm.
like in the first instance, along with a few other investors. But I think that reflects how much you believed in this. I mean, look,
Yeah.
it's an obvious huge potential market, but it's a fucking hard thing to do.
Right.
I mean, you're talking like did you really think through to start with, like how much effort and how much capital commitment and how many resources that this would require, or did you almost not want to think about that? You
We
just
were
want to start.
completely naive. We were so naive. It's actually pretty hilarious when I look back at it. It was we were so for me, when you really think about that, I'm like, okay, I see the problem, I see the different possible solutions that can come in. Well, game over. I have figured it all out. I'm generally, I'm generally somewhat intelligent. I'm not a complete dum
Oh,
dum.
for my medal. You are
Exactly.
from Mexico.
Exactly. So let's figure it out. It's already figured out. So that was, that naiveness was definitely there, and I'm actually glad because had I really thought about it too much, and especially not being a former operator, and I would have thought like an investor. Okay, X amount of money gives me 1.5x return. Had I thought from that, like, and created done my discounted cash flow analysis and all of that, I would have obviously clearly never taken this initiative to do healthcare because reality on the ground is this is very difficult. It is very difficult because you are dealing with uh, you're building it in a company where people generally do not want to change the status quo. They're generally very okay with how things have been, despite a significant amount of suffering. Because and it's not just Mexico; it's everywhere. It happens in India. We have seen health tech system in India. For the audience, a healthcare system in India was equally as bad and still as horrible as Mexico. But in the last 4 or 5 years, we have just made just so much progress in making sure that healthcare is available to everybody and not just access to a doctor, just everything, data being centralized, electronic health records, and all of that, everybody sort of being in the system. Um, so we have always known that. So yeah, we were completely naive, and so we burned more cash than I expected I would. And in the end, we made decent amount of mistakes. And in the end, now we have gotten to a point there where we feel extremely confident that we have basically knocked on every door and now know that this is the right one. We have made pass through it. We know what areas in medicine that we want to focus on. How are we acquiring customers? How are we acquiring doctors? The ecosystem is kind of like building itself very, very organically. So I'm glad sometimes being naive is actually a good thing.
Yeah,
If you try to be too intelligent, then you most likely will never take the risk.
that's the
That
thing. That's the thing. When you're doing something as gargantuan as this, it's possibly best not to think about the actual scale of it to start with, because you would probably never start in the first place. Um,
exactly,
yeah, it's best just to get going, and kind of try and make it work along the way, I guess.
exactly.
But kudos to you for doing that. So, I mean, like, have you, in terms of like talking about Mexico, you say like it's a country where people kind of don't mind things the way they are, traditions, lifestyle. It's all kind of fairly embedded in the culture.
Hmm.
And Mexico can be quite insular, I guess, in my experience, in the sense that not a lot of people look outside of Mexico. I
Hmm.
mean, I'd say probably most Mexicans, most normal Mexicans, don't ever even leave Mexico.
Hmm.
Um, so um, you're obviously going to find a lot of pushback from that, but I think certainly from what I've seen in Mexico, like technology kind of adoption and acceptance of technology across anything, once people get it and they're there, they kind of, they go along with it. So I can imagine your patient rate is increasing,
Yeah.
um, and I imagine a lot of that's probably happening through word of mouth. I mean, have you put it have you enacted a widespread marketing strategy, or has this literally just grown organically?
It's been completely organic. We have done very, very little marketing. And the only marketing that we did was just to understand that when we do marketing, what channels actually work in terms of customer acquisition. Look, our belief is always build a product that people need
Yeah,
and provide the best service, and it will grow. So the way to think about Elevar and how, sort of like how we have been successful so far is, just by understanding now that we know that these are the areas that people need help with, and we
yeah,
provide great service. Our doctors went above and beyond in providing basically the solving their problems, providing great service, and all of that. So from there on, people just start recommending us to their friends. Hey, you're feeling bad. You don't have time to go to a doctor. Why don't you just go on WhatsApp and start talking, chatting with our doctor, and they will at least guide you whether you need to go to a doctor or you don't, or these are the things that you can do. So that's how it grew organically, and with by doing so, we sort of like started to develop our concept too. And the way Elevar has become now is concierge medicine, right? We capture people when they have a need, whatever medical need that they may have. We address it right on the spot, and from there on, we tell them you need to go see a GP, you need to go see a specialist, you need to do a lab work, or you need to have these medications. And at no point the patient feels that they have to try to figure something out. They always have a doctor as a guardian to hold their hand and take them from where they started to feel any kind of symptoms, any kind of issues, nervousness, all the way to treatment and just feeling back to 100%. So in that way, we really have had to do very little marketing because it has just been great service. Oh, you should go try this service. And what's also has happened is people have started to ask us, give us more and more ideas. Like people would come in and ask, hey, this is great, but can I talk to you, Dr. XYZ, that I'm chatting with right now? I will pay X amount of money to talk to you right now. If I can just talk to you right now, I'm like, okay, this is great. So that means that we are validating our product further without even having to market people that, hey, you can actually talk to them via whatever, telemedicine or in person. Has been an inbound inquiry. About 40% of our patients are asking us, have asked us, I will pay X amount of money to talk to you right now. So like, okay, now we need to build a platform where we can instantly, once we have captured these patients, convert them into a telemedicine consultation or send them to a specialist for an in-person consultation if they need, or any sort of ancillary services that they need to have. And this is where I think, you didn't ask, but it's important to mention that data has played a massive, massive role for us. How are we different from some of the companies that have tried to do that and have failed? Is because we are collecting all sorts of data on our patients that ranges from, their actual medical needs to the behavioral data on how they're interacting, their levels of urgencies, and what kind of services could they really need, and start building, crafting a product based on their needs. And so, yeah, very little marketing. We are actually looking into doing marketing now that we know the market fairly well on who to market to, and that's something that we are in the process of figuring out right now.
Yeah. What strikes me about this, and what I think is very clever about it, is, and this is like one of the key things Peter Thiel always talks about, and what he talked about a lot in Zero to One, was that it's important not to go about something trying to disrupt an industry. It's important to try and add value to an industry that already established industry that already exists and everyone within it. And I
Hmm.
think what you're doing is, rather than trying to take over everything, you're adding important pieces in the middle of and but adding value to both sides. So adding value to the patient, obviously, and in giving them access and quality of care, but also giving value to the doctors in terms of enabling them to earn more money, enabling
Hmm.
them really to build their own practice within your platform, all of the things that they couldn't do before, and make a decent living doing a hard, highly skilled job, um, and kind of elevating them. It pardon the pun, elevating them within society to where they should be for doing that job. Um, so,
That's
like,
what that's the name, huh? Hence the name Elevar Salud, Elevate Health.
right,
Exactly.
and I think important for people to take note of that. Like, yes, it's a huge thing, but you're putting the pieces together that are already there. You're just helping it run in a much more effective way, in a fairer way, and again giving value to both sides.
Yeah, exactly. Look, though we believe in network business, we are not here to build clinics, put equipment, employ doctors, and all of that. Very
Right,
capital intensive
right.
business. We will not succeed. We will never make enough money to deserve to grow and solve this problem as we would like to. So the reality is, in Mexico, the infrastructure sort of already exists. There are enough doctors, there are enough medical facilities, there is enough desire for the doctors. Nobody really becomes a doctor because, oh, it's a cool thing because my life will be very good. People mostly choose to become a doctor because they're very passionate about it, and especially in Mexico, where they also know that they don't really, most likely they're not going to make enough money, so it's why they really become doctors, driven by passion. We
Yeah,
want to
it's
make
a moral endeavor rather than an economic one, which is different
exactly.
to other parts of to many other parts of the world.
Exactly. And so we want to make sure that people who have invested their life, their time, their money, their academics into this have get the value in return for doing such a noble thing that they're doing. So again, network business, the pharmacy chains exist that can distribute medication. Great. They actually exist in a very, very great network of
Mm.
pharmacy. The doctors are sort of unevenly distributed in Mexico, mostly focused on big metropolitan areas. If we can digitize some of that, then we have figured that to a certain extent as well. And for the rest, we're going to have to figure out, which we are figuring out, how do we make sure if somebody lives in Tabasco, Chihuahua, or Chiapas, the
Mm.
very first of all, not very densely populated parts of the country, but also very far flung areas where infrastructure just really sucks. But everybody has a smartphone. Majority of people have a smartphone. They are doing a lot of things on smartphones. So, okay, it's better than having nothing. So if we can connect them to medical services like that, let's just do that. So that's exactly, to reiterate your point, network business is what we believe in. It's
Mm,
capex low. It's not capex heavy. We don't. We can generally size up or size down our expenses or supply as the demand comes. And that's what we really believe in. I've personally been a distressed investor all my career.
mm.
And I want to make sure that we remain asset light and our investment go in building the best digital infrastructure and making sure the quality of service never suffers.
Yeah, it's a smart thing to do for sure. Um, so talking about Mexico, like as a geography, as a country, um, getting investment in Mexico is difficult. I mean, Mexico is very much a place where you need to know people. I mean, I know you
Uh-huh.
have a good network. We have extended, reasonably good networks in the country because you've been down there for a while. We know people that have been down there for a while.
Mhm.
Uh, but I presume, and well, I don't presume. I know what you've been doing is looking for people who can understand this, who are not based in Mexico and can invest into the company in Mexico. That is a difficult thing to do. I mean, what pushback have you found from people? Like, you know, any hesitancy in investing in Mexico?
Mhm.
Has that been an issue in particularly with raising investment?
Yeah, that's another complexity that you face in emerging markets and markets like Mexico. The venture capital system, for example, in Mexico is in early stages. It's beyond nascent, but it's early. There are some great funds here who have done some amazing things to transform the system. Very respectable work that they have done.
Absolutely.
And but I think what's happening is a lot of the system is still stuck in the fintech bubble, and it's not really a bubble when you think about that, right? Because everything is based every any other industrial vertical that you want to build that is technologically supported, which is when venture they will be funded by venture capital.
Mhm.
You need to have a transactional environment. So the funds here have done amazing work building that, but they haven't. They are just now starting to look beyond fintech to see what are the other pain points that exist in the industry, in the economy, for the consumer, for the businesses, and so we found ourselves caught in a time where the fintech roller coaster was on its way up
Mm.
and the excitement was building and everybody was building, had the dream of building a unicorn. And now it's coming down and people are looking to look at things outside. We are just caught in that time where they're still looking, they haven't really executed or developed any expertise outside. So long story short, it's been challenging for sure. We have had contact with some great funds. It's been challenging for them to see how somebody can transform healthcare because they're like, look, people have tried to do that before. It has not worked. Uh, or we actually don't know anything about healthcare. We have never done anything in healthcare. All we know is fintech. So sorry. So for us, it's like, okay, well, somebody has to do it. We have chosen ourselves to do it. So let's look at funds that are maybe not from here. We got a very, very good reception from funds that were not Mexican, like especially from the border in the U.S. Healthcare is one of the most booming sectors after artificial intelligence. Uh, in that part of the world. So for us, that's been a good blessing, where we have gotten, and obviously my own network coming from finance. We have been, people know me, they know what kind of work I've done, and I think fortunately I have a good name on the street yet. So we've been able to raise the money that we needed for
Mm.
every step we're taking in increments from that side of the world. Uh, and in the process, we are hoping that with our success, we can actually show the investment world domestically in Mexico. that, look, guys, it is possible. It is possible to go look outside of the box and see what are the things that need transformation, support the people that you like,
Yeah,
and continue to build this ecosystem.
yeah. And how do you find the ecosystem in Mexico generally? Like, it's quite, as you say, it's quite nascent. But for me, certainly being down there, there was the kind of energy and the kind of pioneer attitude, almost still being very early stage, but like big risks, big potential, very underdeveloped industries across a range of different spaces,
Mhm.
um, but a hell of a lot of innovation happening.
A lot.
Um,
Yeah.
it's a great environment to be a part of. I assume, particularly in Mexico City, the ecosystem there. How do you find working within that as quite a prominent figure within it?
I think it's amazing. I really find it so incredible. I feel like, from what I have read, I was not around, but imagine what Silicon Valley might have been in the 80s and 90s,
Yeah, exactly.
when startup scene was really booming. Nobody was really at its throat to the founders, particularly that the competition, that because everything is just so new, so there's very little overlap. So what I find is that there's this very amazing brotherhood and sisterhood that exists between founders, a very amazing camaraderie that exists, which to me is really essential, and to build a
Sure.
network. To Building a startup is a difficult undertaking. It's a soul searching mission almost.
Yeah,
And when you're surrounded by people who are doing the same thing, then life becomes a little bit easier. Um,
definitely.
what we have seen is that every founder faces sort of like the same thing that as we do, the problems, finding the lack of support in the ecosystem, from investors to potential partners and all of that. I personally believe that it's, although horrible, but in a way it's also good, because these founders, like ourselves, will are going through turbulent times in the very beginning to
Yeah,
build these strong foundations. To the ones that will succeed, will have seen a lot of stress. They have been stress tested very early. They will be more financially savvy on how to build their companies. They
yeah,
will be more, not just chase unprecedented growth, unsustainable growth, but focus on profitability, focus on building sustainable teams, doing more with less. And I think, frankly, this is the environment that we are headed into, in the ecosystem that we exist, whether in Mexico or the US or in Europe or in Asia. And I think, in a way, in a messed up way, it's pretty good.
yeah. I think you're right. Like, I think anybody who's been down there for the last few years, cutting their teeth, so to speak,
Yeah.
like trying to do things, um, the experience that you will get from that is invaluable. Whether the first venture you work on works or not,
Mhm.
you'll learn a hell of a lot for your next one, and also within that experience creating a lot of value for the whole ecosystem, because everybody's experiencing it together, right? Everybody's making mistakes, everybody's learning from their own mistakes and from each other, um, and creating a richer ecosystem for it, which is great to see. I mean, it takes a unique kind of person to want to do that. I mean, I know, like on the even on the VC side, it's like you kind of, the obvious thing to think is, well, why don't more US or European VCs move, just set up an office in Mexico and move down there? Like, what's going on? And the answer to that question probably is there's actually not a lot of people who want to do it.
Mhm.
Not a lot of founders really who would think, okay, I'm going to go to Mexico and I'm just going to move my life there and I'm just going to do this because, like, it's just an unusual thing to do.
It is.
Um, but the opportunity is there and it's incredible. And I think I would encourage strongly, as I'm sure you would, like any ambitious founders or entrepreneurs or investors even. anybody who works in the startup world, at least go to Mexico City, at least, and spend a month or two there and really see already how well developed it is and the potential that it has. The potential for incredible returns there is vast, like
That's
probably
right.
better than you'll see in most places in the world. But also, what you'll see is an incredible startup ecosystem, a lot of great talent there,
Hmm.
very much a collaborative environment,
Yeah.
and people helping each other. You won't be alone,
Yeah.
and you'll be very welcomed. And also, what you'll see in the country more generally is a booming country. Like,
Yeah.
and this is you. If you come from Europe or from North America at the moment, and you go there, and you're like, oh fuck me, this is what it used to be like in our countries when stuff was actually happening and stuff
Exactly.
was growing. Like industry was growing, wealth was increasing, tons of investment coming into the country, like from nearshoring partnerships, for example, manufacturing deals. Like there's a shitload of stuff going on, and the country is going like this. It's going up and up and up, and by anyone's projections, it will continue to do that for the next 10, 15, 20 years at least. And how well it can do after that will I think depend a lot on how well it's managed by the government, and hopefully they can step up their game a little bit as well. But it's
Yeah.
a great place to go. The energy is fantastic, and yeah, I think I would encourage anybody to go and get involved, as I'm sure you would.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, Chris, it's changing. In the last year, you're seeing, as you saw, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs from who are not Mexicans are
Right.
coming to Mexico, and because the opportunity is just massive, right? We are transforming a brick and mortar. We are trying to skip the whole brick and mortar life cycle that happened in America, in Western Europe, of building
Yeah.
that infrastructure, replacing it completely digitally.
Yeah.
So the opportunity set is just substantial. So entrepreneurs are coming in, and I see actually more and more entrepreneurs every time in these events who are Mexicans and also non-Mexicans. So it's happening on both ways. And the same thing is happening with investors. If you think about a venture capital fund who's based in the US, but there are so many. I mean, it's the hub. And every deal is very competitive.
Yeah.
Let's say you are VC1, I'm VC2 in San Francisco, in Silicon Valley. We like a deal. Then it's a dog eat dog world. We are just in raising the valuation just to get the deal and all of that. And that
Exactly.
doesn't happen here. So the opportunities to earn an alpha are significant in Mexico. So there are a lot of funds that are coming to Latin America, emerging markets, like what happened in India, in Asia, in other parts of emerging markets. So it's happening. So that's changing, and that for me, it's very encouraging to see, and I'm a big fan of that. Um, and yeah, look, the support ultimately will have to come from the local businesses, the local government, and all of that. And if that happens, then there is no stopping. With the macroeconomical and geopolitical way the world is playing out right now, with all the nearshoring that is happening, the entire supply chain as we speak is moving from Asia to Mexico mostly.
Yeah.
So Mexico just has so much to gain in every way. And I wish people are, I know people are seeing that, but I wish for people to see it more and more that, unless there's a major catastrophical event happen geopolitically around the world, Mexico is probably one of the best places to be in, to take advantage of the new boom, the new economical cycle that we're entering,
Yeah.
um, and be a part of that, be a part of that build out. And that's frankly, on the macroeconomical level, that's been a big driver for us to be out here.
For sure. For sure. And again, I applaud you for it because it's a great move. It's just not a it's not an easy one, but it's completely worth it.
Thank you.
Um, so so yeah, I think. Well, I mean, how have you like? How do you find like? How do you see things playing out in the near future? I mean, for Elevar, for you, for life in Mexico. I mean, is this like is this you for life now? Like, are you going to hang on to this baby and grow it for the long term? What's your long term plan? Is it to exit, and then what does that look like potentially as an exit strategy?
Yeah, great question. Look, yeah, I see both me and my wife, we see ourselves being here for a very long time. We love Mexico. To me, it reminds me of my birth country of India in a variety of ways. To her, it actually does not remind her of her birth country of Germany in any way, which is what she's trying to
Just thinking about it, sitting at home going, "No, I said
say.
it. You said we were leaving next week."
For her, it's like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's so different. For me, it's like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's so similar, you know? So we found our synergies
Yeah,
in Mexico in that way. And regarding Elevar, look, there is so much to do in healthcare. There's just so much to do in healthcare. There's so much when we succeed with Elevar in the step that we are taking to for us to do. There's just so much wood to chop here in healthcare. And look, I had a very comfortable life in New York. I was very comfortable in my job, what I was doing. I was in a very nice career trajectory. Everything was looking bright. For me to come to Mexico was a huge risk, and I like taking sort of calculated risks. And this has been, and the way I see what we can do with Elevar, sometimes I do not even want to go to sleep because I just want to keep writing it all down, figure out ways on how to do that. And it's really become my life's work at the moment, and I don't suspect that that will change anytime soon. So we want to continue to build and exit opportunities. Look, there's so many. There's several. The ones that we can think about is the more, I guess, the more achievable ones. Is we are building the One Medical or a carbon health of the U.S. in Mexico that does not exist. If you are thinking of how Mexican and American economy are getting tied together even
yeah,
closer and closer, we are a very good acquisition target for any of these large American healthcare companies, the CVS Health, Carbon Health, Amazon,
for
all
sure.
of these companies are getting into there. So if we were looking for an exit and if we play our cards right and if we do the things right and if we really build something, the exit opportunity is just sitting right around the corner for
Yeah,
us.
I mean,
And yeah,
as a data acquisition play alone for a big US company, it's if you, I
exactly.
mean, if you build it out to the scale that it needs to be, it's fucking incredible opportunity.
It's incredible opportunity. It's a 20, like the direct market that we are looking at, which is primary and preventative care market only, is a $28 billion cash market. This
Yeah,
market is not even, complex with the insurance. This is just cash market,
yeah,
you know. So if I'm working in a corp dev team at Amazon or any of these like large XYZ healthcare companies, and I'm looking for acquisition targets, and I have figured out that it's completely saturated in domestically, and I'm looking for alpha outside, this is a no-brainer because the economies are so tied together, and there's a good data play and all of that. Then the exit opportunities are plentiful, and that's sort of when I think from my banker mind, I'm like, okay, I'm not building this thing to nowhere. There is
like
clearly,
in terms
yeah,
of like the wider geopolitical environment, there's really no way this goes back the other way now. Like
yeah, yeah,
everything is going to come to Mexico,
yeah,
that has been in India and China,
yeah,
and there's so many things would have to change completely in the world for that to be different. So
yeah.
it's not as risky a play as it sounds when you
No,
start to factor in those things.
Mexico is probably the safest place on the planet right now. Like when you really think about that, Uncle Sam will never let anything happen to Mexico.
No,
'Cause we are just so even more closely tied together, and it's visible on the ground. Chris, when you were here and you spent what 6, 7 months here in Mexico,
6.5 months I think I was there.
it's
Came
in.
for a week, stayed for 6.5 months.
Exactly. It's incredible. You feel like I still feel like I've been here for almost 2.5 years. I feel like I never left New York, or I feel like I'm in LA, like I'm in downtown LA when
Yeah.
I'm in Mexico City. It's
It
just
has that kind of vibe. It really does.
yeah.
It doesn't feel like an underdeveloped country when you're in the middle of Mexico City.
Or
It feels
that you're not safe. Yeah. Or some violence will happen. Right.
honestly, I feel safer walking around the streets in Mexico City than I do walking around the streets in European cities. Like literally, like as in terms of like physical safety, you don't see robberies. You don't see. I didn't see. I mean, you know, other than like, let's be honest, like drugs and prostitution, you don't
Yeah.
see any crime. Like that stuff quite obvious, but
Right.
that's I think is obvious in any city. Aside
You
from that, there's no, you don't see violent crime, you don't see robberies, you don't see any. I didn't see any of that at all,
right.
and you really do feel safe, which was something that surprised me a lot. I mean, the first couple of days I was there, it was like oh my god, in Mexico City, like blah blah blah. Like, but
Oh yeah, I remember we went to that thing and the first night you were here. And you you were back for 15 hours.
driving your fucking driving your fucking car across Mexico City. I didn't even know where I was going. I didn't even know what side of the road to drive on.
That's another one. Well, that's on you. You British. You guys just drive on the wrong side.
Yeah, no, sorry, that is on me. Oh, that was a funny night.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, it's. I think anyone would be surprised. Um, and oh yeah, if I haven't told you already, Kiki and I are coming back in January and February.
I heard, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You did tell me. I'm looking forward. I mean, it feels very far away, but time flies.
It'll fly. Of course, it'll fly. Hopefully, we'll see you in Europe before then. Anyway,
Likewise. Looking forward to that.
if you make it out of Mexico this summer at all,
We would like
I
to. Let's
wouldn't be
see.
I
Let's
wouldn't
see.
be
Elevar.
surprised if you don't, because you do have a lot to do.
We have a lot to do, but it would be nice to find at least a week, maybe. But the way things are right now, we have just so much to do. We are on a hiring spree right now. Also, anybody who's listening to the podcast, we are actively hiring people in deep tech, AI ops, machine learning, performance marketing, just medical operations. We're not hiring an army. We need maybe one or two people in each of the things that I mentioned. But if you have any recommendations, you can always reach out to me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Vidit Gupta, Elevar Salud. Shoot me a message over there. And I am very active. I'll respond, and there will never be a time that you don't hear back from me.
I'll put your contact links in the podcast description so people can reach out, and I'm sure they will. Um, assuming anyone listens to it. Hopefully they do.
I
Um,
think, and as a closing remark, because I know we both have to go. Look, we're building Elevar Salud. We're building Elevar Salud because we have a passion of making sure that everybody who deserves healthcare has ability to take care of their health. They don't have to think about, can I afford it? Is it close to me? Is it going to be a good service? It will be. That's why we are doing this. We can use all sorts of support, from everybody when we're building our team for people to come in and, give us a shot. It's very easy, guys. You just need to go on WhatsApp. You have to talk about what's going on. Our doctors will attend you and they will guide you on whatever it is that you need. And give us a shot. Help us build a bigger, brighter future for Mexico, for Latin America, when it comes to taking care of people, for people of their health.
mm,
And any kind of words of encouragement, criticism, anything that comes along, we are very open to receiving that as long as it's constructive. So always feel free to reach out to me directly or anybody on my team that you may come across. Or Chris, who's a good friend and has been a amazing sounding board for me for the last 6 months for everything. We have shared a lot of wins, losses, successes, cries, tears, everything together. And I think, Chris, you probably know what I'm about, what Elevar Salud is all about, and a bunch of other founders that you're supporting in the ecosystem very, very well. So thank you for
Thank you.
the hard work that you have put
My
in
pleasure.
getting the ecosystem and helping people like me and others
No,
in.
my absolute pleasure. I love to do it. This is a kind of a passion project for me as well because having lived in Mexico, I know a lot of kind of normal Mexican people, and I know how much of a big difference this will make to them. So I'm happy to help you in any way I can. And aside from that, it's a fucking great opportunity. It really is. So I'm happy to do it, happy to keep working with you and making this a success. And I really appreciate you taking the time out to talk to us today, Vidit. Always a pleasure. And I wish you well on your journey as it continues. All right, man. Absolutely. Take care, brother. See you soon. Health and success, my friend. Well, that was a slice, as they say. So next week, just to finish off here, next week my guest will be the one and only Ashley Martis, CEO and founder of Startup Fuel. He's based up here in Toronto, Canada, as I am currently as well. We've got some huge announcements on some of the work we've been doing in the last month or two, looking at completely reshaping the venture capital model to offer much more efficiency and value both to startups and LPs. Stay tuned for that next week. Um, that will also be the first Renaissance podcast recorded live in person in our studio here in Toronto. Shout out to ConArts for letting us use their beautiful space for us to do that and record that there. So looking forward to that. Also looking forward to seeing everyone this week who's attending the Startup Visa Summit here in Toronto, looking at making immigration uh, internationally more of an effective process, enabling people to move to countries where there are more opportunities, but also focused on bringing more innovators, more founders, more investors here into Canada. So really excited about that event and seeing everyone there. Have a good week, everybody. That's episode 3 of the Renaissance podcast. Thank you again to Vidit, and we'll see you next week.